$9 billion. That was the paper value of a company whose core product, according to federal prosecutors, almost never worked. This is the autopsy of the Theranos, and the fortune that bled out on a drop of blood. Elizabeth Holmes founded the Theranos in 2003, when she was 19 years old and a sophomore at Stanford. She dropped out, kept her tuition money, and told investors she was going to change medicine forever. The pitch was seductive in its simplicity. Instead of sending a vial of blood to a lab and waiting days for results, her machine, called the Edison, could run hundreds of diagnostic tests from a single fingertip prick. Faster, cheaper, democratized. The kind of idea that makes a room of wealthy people lean forward. And lean forward they did. Holmes had a gift. She dressed in black turtlenecks, dropped her natural voice to a baritone register she maintained in nearly every public appearance, and spoke about saving lives with the conviction of someone who had already done it. She named her company after the two things it was supposed to combine: therapy and diagnosis. She built a board stacked with former secretaries of state, retired generals, and titans of industry. She appeared on magazine covers. She gave TED talks. By 2014, private investors had valued the Theranos at $9 billion, making Holmes, on paper, the youngest female self-made billionaire in American history. There was one problem. The Edison machine, by most accounts that emerged later, could not reliably do what she said it could. Medical diagnostic testing is not a domain where you can ship a minimum viable product and iterate. A false negative on a cancer screening is not a bug to be patched in the next update. A faulty cholesterol reading does not get corrected in version 2. Blood tells the truth, or it tells nothing useful at all. What federal prosecutors would eventually argue, and what a jury would find, is that Holmes knew this, or at minimum, could not have not known it. Internal engineers raised alarms. The machines produced wildly inconsistent results. For many of the tests the Theranos offered to the public, the company was allegedly running the samples on third-party commercial analyzers made by Siemens, the same machines available at any standard laboratory, and in some cases, allegedly modifying the results before they went out. Patients in Walgreens locations across Arizona received blood test results from a Theranos machine and made real medical decisions based on those numbers. One man allegedly received a result suggesting he might have HIV. He did not. A woman's results allegedly showed abnormalities that sent her to her doctor in a panic. The readings, it would later emerge, were wrong. These were not abstract financial victims. These were people. The unraveling began not with a whistleblower inside the company, though there were several who tried, but with a journalist. John Carreyrou of the Wall Street Journal started asking questions in 2015. Holmes and her company fought back hard, with lawyers, with public denials, with pressure on sources. But Carreyrou kept pulling threads. His first story ran in October 2015. The headline questioned whether the Theranos' technology worked as advertised. The company called it factually and legally incorrect. Within weeks, regulators from the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services showed up to inspect the Newark, California laboratory. What they found was serious enough that by 2016, CMS had banned Holmes personally from operating a clinical laboratory for 2 years and moved to revoke the lab's certification entirely. Walgreens terminated its partnership. Safeway, which had spent approximately $400 million building out in-store health clinics partly in anticipation of a Theranos rollout that never materialized, walked away. The $9 billion valuation collapsed. It did not decline gradually, the way a stock chart might show a bad quarter. It simply ceased to exist. The company was dissolved in 2018. In June of that year, a federal grand jury indicted Elizabeth Holmes and her former president and romantic partner, Ramesh Balwani, known as Sonny, on multiple counts of wire fraud and conspiracy to commit wire fraud. The charges covered two alleged schemes, one against investors, who prosecutors said were misled about the technology's capabilities and its commercial relationships, and one against patients, who prosecutors said received inaccurate test results they relied on for health decisions. Holmes and Balwani were tried separately. Holmes went first. The trial lasted nearly 4 months, from August through November of 2021. She took the stand in her own defense, an unusual choice, and testified for 7 days. She acknowledged that Theranos had failed. She denied that she had committed fraud. She said she had genuinely believed in the technology. The jury did not fully accept either side's account. In January 2022, they found her guilty on 4 counts: 3 counts of wire fraud against investors, and 1 count of conspiracy to commit wire fraud against investors. They acquitted her on the counts related to patient fraud and deadlocked on 3 others. It was a partial verdict that satisfied almost no one completely, but it was enough. In November 2022, Judge Edward Davila sentenced Holmes to 11 years and 3 months in federal prison. She was also ordered to pay restitution of approximately $450 million, though recovering that money from someone whose net worth had gone to zero presented its own complications. Balwani was tried separately and fared worse, guilty on all 12 counts, sentenced to nearly 13 years. Holmes began serving her sentence at a federal prison camp in Bryan, Texas, in May 2023, after appeals to delay it were exhausted. She has appealed the conviction. The appeal is ongoing. What does the autopsy reveal? The cause of death here was not incompetence alone, and it was not simply greed alone. It was the specific and dangerous collision of the two inside an industry where the consequences of pretending something works are not just financial. In most technology companies, a product that does not work loses money. In medical diagnostics, a product that does not work can cost lives, or at minimum send terrified people to emergency rooms with false alarms, or send others home reassured when they should not be. The Theranos autopsy reveals something about how money dies in Silicon Valley. Specifically, the same culture that celebrated moving fast and breaking things was applied to a domain where the things being broken were human beings' health records. Investors backed a story more than a product because the story was extraordinary, and the person telling it was magnetic. Regulators moved slowly because the company was private, and the technology was allegedly proprietary, and access was controlled with the kind of secrecy that was, at the time, treated as a sign of competitive strength rather than a red flag. The lesson the money leaves behind is quiet but hard. Charisma is not a clinical trial. A great pitch is not a peer-reviewed study. And $9 billion, it turns out, can be built on something as thin and unreliable as a story that everyone wanted to believe.